That's the kind of story that keeps you up at night, isn't it? A chilling whisper of a tale, where silence is the deadliest weapon, and a single choice can detonate a life. Get ready, because the veneer of a perfect life is about to shatter. The polished marble floor of the private Los Angeles airport gleamed under the soft ambient light. Mason Valente, a tech magnate who commanded headlines with a twitch of his eyebrow, strode as if he owned the sky itself. Beside him, Savannah Cruz, a dazzling actress, was a vision in oversized sunglasses and a tailored white jumpsuit. The soft click of her heels on the tile floor echoed her laugh, a little too loud for something he barely said. Mason smiled, with the casual arrogance of a man who believed the world was his concierge. The staff at the exclusive terminal didn't give them a second glance. They were used to his kind, tycoons and starlets, coming and going like the wind. "The jet is ready, Mr. Valente," the attendant said, gesturing toward a velvet-lined walkway. Mason gave a curt nod, a subtle dismissal that screamed, "I'm richer than you, but I'll pretend I'm not." He leaned in toward Savannah and whispered, "Next stop, Cabo. No paparazzi, no headlines, no wife." Savannah smiled, her fingers twitching slightly on his arm. She glanced around, just once, a flicker of something close to nervousness. As they reached the end of the walkway, a sleek Gulfstream G700 waited on the tarmac, its engines humming, and the cabin door open like a secret invitation. The air smelled of jet fuel and designer perfume. Mason took a step toward the stairs, his gait smooth, and his jaw set with the confidence that had landed him on the cover of Forbes. Suddenly, the loudspeaker crackled to life. "Ms. Sofia Valente, please present yourself at Gate C." The voice was crisp and neutral, but it landed like a blade. Savannah froze. Mason's foot stopped in midair for a second longer than it should have before coming back down. He turned his head, as if he hadn't heard correctly. The announcement repeated, clearer this time. "Ms. Sofia Valente, your immediate presence is required at Gate C." Mason's smirk faltered for an instant. His eyes scanned the terminal windows, a flash of something like uncertainty. Savannah turned to him, her voice low. "Just a coincidence," he murmured, his jaw tight. "She's not supposed to be here." He took another step, but this time it wasn't as smooth. There was a subtle hitch in his stride, a fracture in his usual effortless confidence. As he reached the first step of the jet, a security agent stepped out from a side corridor. He was tall, with a pressed uniform and an unreadable expression. "Mr. Valente," he said, "I'm going to have to ask you to wait a moment." Mason blinked. He hadn't been asked to wait in years. The engines continued their soft hum behind him, but the noise felt distant now. Everything felt distant. Savannah took a step back, taking off her sunglasses for the first time. "Mason, what's happening?" He didn't answer. His gaze was fixed past the terminal's glass doors, because at the end of the concourse, beyond the velvet ropes and the luxury perfumes, a woman in a long coat, her face hidden by a hood, had just entered the terminal. The security cameras captured her every step. It was the calm before the storm. It was Sofia's silent revenge. 2 days earlier, the couple's penthouse was as silent as a tomb. Floor-to-ceiling windows cast a cool gray light onto the polished floors and minimalist furniture. Sofia Valente sat alone on the kitchen island, sipping a cup of chamomile tea. Her silk robe draped her 6-month pregnant body. She looked serene, almost beautiful, but her gaze was lost, fixed on a screen that glowed brightly. Mason's iPad had vibrated at 5:47 a.m. A single message lit up the screen. He was still asleep in the bed, sprawled out like a man with nothing to hide. Sofia had ignored the first buzz, but the second came with a preview. "Don't forget the white dress. Cabo's waiting. Me too. Kisses. S. The teacup clicked against the countertop. She stared at it for a full minute, then slid her finger to open the thread. A month of intimate messages scrolled forward. Did you tell her yet? She's clueless, isn't she? I can't believe you sleep next to that pregnant whale. Sophia didn't flinch. Her breathing didn't quicken. She simply set the iPad down with the quiet care of someone disarming a bomb. For a long time, she didn't move. The only sound in the apartment was the rhythmic hum of the baby monitor from the nursery they had just painted sky blue. When she finally stood, her robe shifted slightly. She adjusted it with a calm precision. Not a tear, not a word. Only a whispered exhale as she walked toward the bedroom, her fingers tightening around her phone. At 8 a.m., Sophia was sitting in a quiet cafe across from a woman named Maria Gonzalez, a private investigator with graying hair and a no-nonsense stare. Maria said nothing at first. She simply reviewed the screenshots Sophia had printed, turning each page like an autopsy report. "You want me to follow him?" Maria finally asked, looking up. "No," Sophia said calmly. "I want to know how long this has been going on, where he's taking her, and if he's done it before." Maria nodded. "You're not the first wife I've worked for, Ms. Valente." Sophia's lips turned up, but it wasn't a smile. "I doubt many have had to do this while pregnant." Maria didn't so much as blink. "I'll have something for you by tomorrow. I'll be in touch." Back at home, Mason came downstairs freshly showered, hair still damp, checking his Rolex. Sophia was in the living room, reading. She looked up, her eyes soft, her grace gentle. "Are you leaving?" she asked, her voice steady. "Investor Summit in San Francisco," he replied, buttoning his jacket. "Just 2 nights. Have a good trip," she said. Then, sweetly, "Text me when you land." He kissed her on the forehead, like a politician kissing a camera lens. After he left, Sophia rose from her chair, walked to the window, and watched his sleek black car disappear into the city traffic. She kept watching even after it rounded the corner. That night, she lay alone in their bed, her hands resting protectively on her belly, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. Her phone buzzed once beside her, a message from Maria. "They're flying to LA tomorrow. Final destination, Cabo." "You were right." Sophia exhaled slowly. There was no anger on her face, only a cold determination. She opened her laptop, logged into her legal account, and began drafting something titled Emergency Financial Intervention. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. 2 days later, at the terminal, Savannah Cruz entered the private airport lounge as if she belonged there. Her head was held high, her back straight, and her lips had a nude gloss that matched her manicure. Everything about her look was carefully curated. The designer jumpsuit, the gold hoops, the subtle scent of bergamot, and something far more expensive. She glanced at Mason beside her and smiled like a woman who had just claimed her prize. This was the moment. He had said it, hadn't he? "Once the baby's born, I'm done pretending. And more recently, I'll be gone before she even realizes I've left." Savannah had waited almost 10 months for those words to become action. Her friends had warned her, even mocked her. "He'll never leave his wife," they'd say. But Mason Valente wasn't just another married man. He was Mason Valente, billionaire, visionary, and he had chosen her. They took a seat in a cordoned-off section of the lounge. A waiter brought them champagne. Mason waved it away, but Savannah raised her glass with a confident clink. "To freedom," she whispered. But behind the toast, something flickered under her eyelashes. Because no matter how many times Mason kissed her neck or promised her Italian sunsets, a memory from 3 years ago clawed its way to the surface. Another man, another affair, Another lie she believed. That one had ended with a restraining order and a whispered warning from a woman who had shown up broken and shaking at Savannah's door. "You think you're special? I did too." Savannah had never told Mason about that chapter, just as he hadn't told her everything either. But secrets were currency in their world. Across the terminal, just beyond the frosted glass that separated the luxury from the ordinary, Mason's personal assistant, Adam Ortiz, sat on a bench, nervously scrolling through his messages. Adam hadn't been invited on this trip, which was a red flag already. Mason always brought him. Always. Until this week. A folder lay beside him on the seat, marked with flight manifests and legal notes. He touched it, hesitated, then opened it. Last night's email, again. Subject: Mason Valente travel docs. Make sure IDs match. If anyone asks, it's a tech summit. Nothing personal. No trace. Adam had faked things for Mason before. Fake calendar entries, alibis, leaks to the press. But this? This was international. And there was something else, a discrepancy. Savannah's boarding pass had a different last name. Mason had claimed it was a glitch, but Adam knew it wasn't. It was deliberate. It meant this wasn't just a vacation. It was a clean break. Adam glanced back at the lounge, catching a glimpse of Mason laughing with Savannah. He didn't look like a man going on a trip. He looked like a man on the run. Back in the lounge, Savannah looked at her phone. No messages from her mother. No calls from her agent. Humans. She suddenly felt cold. "Be right back," she told Mason, getting up quickly. "Just need the restroom." He waved her off without looking up, already engrossed in his phone. She walked down the hallway, past gilded doors and mirrored walls, until she stood in front of a restroom. She looked at the woman in the reflection. The mistress. The secret. The stolen future. Then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. One word. Cabo. She stared at it, her heart thumping in her chest. For the first time all morning, Savannah wasn't sure who had actually won. Do you believe a past can define you? Can one mistake change everything? Tell us your experience in the comments and subscribe for the ending, the reappearance, and the turning point. The rain was gently tapping against the windshield as Sophia's black car waited on the edge of the LA cemetery. The driver offered her an umbrella, but she shook her head and stepped out into the drizzle without a word. It was early, too early for visitors, but that was the point. No eyes, no cameras, just silence. She moved slowly across the damp grass, her trench coat billowing in the breeze. 6 rows in. Second headstone on the left. Amelia Rodriguez Valente. A flat headstone in a clean font. No frills, no inscription, just a name. 2 dates, and too much space between them. Sophia knelt. "I told myself I wouldn't come back here," she whispered, "but I needed you." She rested a gloved hand on the stone. The rain slicked tendrils of hair near her temple, but she didn't flinch. Her fingers trembled slightly against her stomach as the baby shifted. A reminder of time passing. Amelia had been the fiery one, the fighter, the one who had once told Sophia, "You either leave the man or you learn to make him regret staying." But Amelia had never faced Mason Valente, not the way Sophia had to. It didn't start with cheating. No, Mason was smarter than that. It started with questions. "Are you sure that's what they said? Maybe you misunderstood. Why do you always make things so negative?" Then came the slow erosion of trust, of friendships, of access. One by one, her bank cards were consolidated, her name removed from company deeds. Private meetings, private phones, private passwords. Mason never raised a hand. He never yelled. That would have been too obvious. Instead, he humiliated her in boardrooms with condescending jokes, corrected her grammar in interviews, made her seem frail and foolish at public events. And the world adored him. Even when she cried, people would say, "You're so lucky. He's a genius." After Amelia died, Sophia stopped pushing back. She smiled for the cameras. She let herself become what Mason wanted, a soft, pregnant, polished presence. But behind that quiet obedience, something darker was forming. Not bitterness, not even revenge. Strategy. That night, after returning from the cemetery, Sophia locked herself in the study and opened a drawer she hadn't touched in months. Inside was an old journal bound in worn navy leather. She opened to a blank page and began to write, not to remember, but to document. "If anything happens to me, check this first," she scrawled on the inside cover. Over the next hour, she detailed every shift in Mason's behavior: names, dates, events, bank transactions, voice notes. The house was silent save for the scratching of her pen. Then she moved to her laptop. Maria's updates were waiting for her. Timestamps, photographs, metadata from Mason and Savannah's shared hotel stays. Sophia didn't cry when she saw them. She barely blinked. Instead, she composed an email to her lawyer titled, "Emergency Asset Freeze. Urgent." She attached scanned copies of the marital agreement, prenatal documents, and photos of Mason boarding the jet with another woman. She didn't send it. Not yet. Instead, she stood from the desk and walked to the nursery. The walls were painted a soft sky blue. The crib was already assembled. Her mother-in-law's teddy bear was arranged neatly in the corner. Sophia stood there for a long time, one hand on her stomach, the other gently grazing the crib rail. "Someday you'll know the truth," she whispered to the child growing inside her. "But you won't grow up afraid of him. I promise." The next morning, Sophia woke up at 5 a.m. sharp. She packed a small carry-on, printed all the necessary documents, and retrieved a passport with her maiden name. Her ticket read Sophia Rodriguez. At 7:15 a.m., she was on her way to the airport. Her driver was instructed not to speak, and at 8:30 a.m., she entered the private terminal, hood up and face down. But inside, Sophia wasn't hiding. She was walking into battle. The soft ping of Sophia's encrypted inbox broke the silence of the early morning. She was sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, her robe wrapped around her like armor, a glass of cool water sitting untouched beside her. Subject: surveillance package. Confidential. From M. Gonzalez Investigations. Attachments: 7 files. Password protected. She opened the folder with precise fingers, knowing already what she was about to see. Still, as the footage began to play, she leaned in, quiet, focused, expressionless. Clip 1. A drone view of a beachfront cottage. Mason, shirtless, hands Savannah a drink. She laughs and climbs into his lap. He kisses her shoulder. Date and time: last Saturday. Clip 2. A private dining terrace lit with string lights. Mason feeds Savannah a bite of dessert, his hand resting on her thigh. Savannah looks at a waiter, as if she owns the world. Sophia paused there, zoomed in. Clip 3. The airport valet. Mason and Savannah stepping out of a black town car. Hand in hand, her Louis Vuitton weekender bag, his custom leather duffel. Matching. Coordinated. Careless. None of it surprised her. What did? What caught her breath? Just for a moment. It was the ease. Mason wasn't pretending to be discreet, wasn't even cautious. He was already gone. She closed the laptop, her hands perfectly still. She didn't wipe away a tear, because there weren't any. That part of her had been emptied out days ago, maybe even years. Instead, she stood, found a folder on the console table, and pulled out a legal packet marked Prenuptial Agreement, Valente Rodriguez. She placed it next to the laptop, opened a second file titled Financial Provisions, Child Custody, and began to type. At 7:43 a.m., an email was sent to her lawyer. Execute emergency freeze on all shared accounts. Proceed with trust execution clause. The documents were already signed. The play was legal, swift, and due to Mason's most recent asset transfer to an offshore account, justifiable. The next step was quieter. She moved through the apartment collecting only what mattered: a passport with her maiden name, a phone charger, the journal from the study, and a folded copy of the security footage. She placed them in a small travel purse and sat on the edge of the bed, listening. The house was silent. Mason hadn't responded to her last text message. "Have a good flight." There was no response, not even a blue check mark. She put on a pair of low heels and glanced in the full-length mirror. Her face was unreadable, makeupless, hair pulled into a low bun, a scarf wrapped tightly around her neck. The kind of woman no one would stop at an airport. Before she left, she stepped into the nursery. She tapped the mobile over the crib, letting it spin with a faint whir. "I'll be back when I have control," she said quietly. Not before. At 9:10 a.m., Sophia arrived at the airport under the name Sophia Rodriguez. She sailed through security without a second glance, thanks to Maria's advanced planning and a discreet call to a trusted contact in security control. Her seat was reserved in the private terminal observation area, with a clear view of Mason's departure gate. She sat down, crossed her legs, and sipped tea as if she were any other traveler. But across the terminal, a digital monitor blinked. "Valente Flight 417, Gate B, departure, 11:30 a.m. She opened her purse. Inside was a printed image of Mason's hand resting on Savannah's back, the time and location stamped on it. It was time. The leather of the VIP lounge sofa stuck slightly to the backs of Savannah's thighs as she adjusted her posture. Outside the panoramic glass, the tarmac shimmered in the pale morning light. Jets taxied by silently, their engines distant and ghostly. Everything in the room, its quiet elegance, its imported air, was designed to make people feel important. But Savannah didn't feel important. She felt watched. Her gaze drifted toward a woman across the room. Young, maybe in her 30s. Brunette, in a worn denim jacket, pushing a baby stroller with gloved hands. She wasn't dressed like she belonged in the lounge. Yet, no one stopped her. No one questioned her. The woman wasn't talking. She wasn't checking a phone. She was simply staring, right at Savannah. Savannah shifted, suddenly too aware of her own posture, the curve of her shoulder, the champagne glass trembling in her hand. "Everything okay?" Mason asked, looking up from his phone. She forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't press, just nodded, half distracted, and went back to whatever message he was typing. Probably to his pilot, or to some other clandestine someone, or maybe even Sophia. The knot in Savannah's throat tightened. She picked up her glass and excused herself to the restroom. Her heels echoed down the hallway, each step hitting the polished floor like a metronome. Inside the restroom, she locked the door and leaned against the sink. She looked at her reflection. Perfect skin, defined cheekbones, a hint of gloss on her lips. But behind the face she had sculpted for Mason's world, something cracked. And then the memory came. Uninvited. Sharp. 3 years ago. In Miami. Another older man. A different kind of promise. Late-night dinners. Whispered futures. "You're all I need." Until the bruises started. until the locked doors and the isolation and the phone checks. He had erased her name from the lease, canceled her cards. She didn't leave. She escaped. She thought Mason was different, that his power came with protection. But power always comes with a price. Back in the lounge, Savannah's stomach roiled. The way Mason had been talking to her lately, the sudden silences, the gentle mockeries when she asked questions, how he laughed a little too loudly when she suggested they go public with the relationship. "We're not ready for that kind of noise," he had said. "No, you aren't ready, but we are." But was it really we, or just him, deciding what part of her was allowed to exist? She unlocked the bathroom door slowly, stepping out into the hallway. The woman with the baby stroller was gone. Vanished. Maybe she was never there at all. Still, Savannah's nerves didn't settle. She returned to Mason, who was now standing by the terminal window, talking in a low voice on his phone to someone. His back was to her. Her phone vibrated. Unknown number. No contact name. Cabo. A single word. Simple. Charged. She stared at it. Then she looked at Mason. And for the first time, Savannah wondered. Not if he was lying, but what he was capable of if the truth got in his way. Love is not a game. It is an investment. How high are you willing to risk for something that is not guaranteed? Is the truth or the illusion more important? Comment below and share your thoughts. The automatic door opened with a sigh as Sophia entered the heart of the private Los Angeles airport. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead hummed in her ears, and the quiet shuffle of polished shoes echoed in the marble hallway. She moved like mist, hood up, shoulders squared, one arm gently cradling the swell of her stomach, the other holding a worn leather travel bag firmly against her side. It wasn't fear she carried, it was focus. Near the far end of the hallway, two men and a woman, in sleek navy suits, stood in a quiet cluster. They held no signs, no name boards, no smiles. But as Sophia drew near, they subtly straightened, and one gave a nod. Guillermo Rueda, her senior lawyer, stepped forward. "You made it," he said softly. Sophia didn't slow her pace. "Where is the officer?" "Security has already been briefed. Officer Delgado will meet you at Gate C. You just need to hand it over." Sophia reached into her bag and pulled out the manila envelope, its seal already broken and restuck once for her review. Inside were printed photos, time-stamped surveillance footage, a notarized declaration, an emergency restraining order filed, temporary custody, and a travel prevention from International Interference Clause. Section 9B. "I don't want a confrontation," she said. "This isn't a show. This is about control." Guillermo nodded. "It will be clean." They walked on together in silence, their steps muffled by the custom terminal carpeting as they neared Gate C. Through a narrow glass wall, the edge of the tarmac shimmered in the morning light, and the distant tail of Mason's jet peeked out from behind a private hangar. Sophia stopped near a discreet service counter where a uniformed security officer was reviewing a clipboard. He looked up as she approached. He was young, in his 20s perhaps, but his eyes were sharp. "Valente?" he asked in a low voice. "Rodriguez," she corrected, with a quiet, bitter smile. "Sophia Rodriguez." She extended the envelope. "These documents are sealed and verified. The restraining order is active. The man boarding that jet is not allowed to leave U.S. territory with a pregnant spouse under existing custody proceedings." The officer opened the envelope, scanning the first page quickly. His eyebrows furrowed. "It's all here. You'll need to step aside while I radio this in. No names over the loudspeaker unless necessary," she said softly. "He doesn't need a warning." The officer nodded and walked away. Sophia leaned against the cool glass panel by Gate C, exhaling for the first time in what felt like hours. Her hand rested on her stomach again. The baby shifted slightly, as if feeling the tension dissipate. Behind her, Guillermo handed her a sealed water bottle. Once they confirm the documents with the supervisor, they'll stop him just before boarding. Sophia didn't respond. Her eyes were now fixed on a reflection in the glass. Down the concourse, on the other side of the terminal, Mason Valente appeared. Taller than she remembered in this light, walking with that casual arrogance she once mistook for confidence. Savannah was by his side, sunglasses on, oblivious. Sophia didn't flinch. The speaker overhead clicked. "Ms. Sophia Valente, please present yourself at Gate C." The last syllable of the loudspeaker echoed in the glass and marble expanse of the terminal, like a gunshot in a church. "Ms. Sophia Valente, please present yourself at Gate C." Mason Valente stopped walking. One foot remained suspended over the jet stairs for a fraction of a second too long, before it slowly backed away, confusion clouding the easy smile that had carried him so far. Savannah looked at him, her expression expectant, then uncomfortable. "Did they just say Sophia?" she asked, her voice tight. Mason didn't answer. His gaze was fixed across the terminal, toward Gate C, where a small figure stood alone. She had taken off her hood. Her face was clear, her hand resting on her rounded belly, like a silent challenge. Sophia, uncrying, unpleading, serene. She walked slowly, her heels tapping a steady rhythm against the tiled floor, her coat billowing like a flag behind her. The lounge went still, heads began to turn, whispers rose like smoke. Savannah followed Mason's gaze. At first, she didn't recognize the woman. This wasn't the frumpy wife she had imagined, the invisible, sticky inconvenience of Mason's excuses. No, this woman was polished, controlled, burning with something just under the surface, but never letting it show. Sophia stopped 10 feet from them. She looked at Savannah once, briefly. Then her eyes met Mason's. "You're not taking my son to any country," she said. The words were soft, clear, final. Savannah blinked. Mason opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He took a step forward, trying a smile, a hand raised in a false act of surrender. "Sophia, we don't have to do this here." "You already did," she cut him off, her voice still even. "You did it when you lied, when you used offshore accounts to hide assets, when you falsified Savannah's name on travel manifests under your assistant's login, and when you booked a jet to leave the country with our unborn child, without my legal consent." Savannah's head snapped toward him. "Wait, what?" Mason turned, panic igniting behind his eyes. "That's not—" Sophia held up a document, a restraining order sealed with legal bold print. "It's exactly that. Effective immediately, you are prohibited from leaving the country with myself or the child without a full custody review. Your international assets have been frozen. You can try to board that jet, Mason, but you will not be welcome in any court that investigates it." The tension broke as the security officer stepped forward. "Mr. Valente, we need to speak with you privately." Mason didn't resist. He couldn't. His hand fell slowly from the boarding stairs. Savannah stood frozen, mascara smudged slightly in the corner of one eye. Sophia didn't move. She simply turned, walking back toward Gate C with the same quiet grace she had entered with. Each step was a statement in itself. The jet behind her remained idle, silent, waiting, irrelevant. Cameras don't record everything, but actions do. What truly matters, reputation or the truth? Comment below and give us your opinion. The price of silence and the silent victory. The paparazzi cameras didn't take long to arrive, and the click of flashes filled the air like static electricity as Sophia approached the microphone in front of her law firm's offices. The small crowd had formed hours earlier. Paparazzi, local press, bloggers with ring lights, and a growing sea of live streaming onlookers, all waiting to see the woman who had grounded Mason Valente. Sophia stood at the podium, flanked by her legal team, a thin folder clutched under one arm. Her custom navy coat fit her body, and her hair, pulled into a low bun, gleamed under the soft afternoon sun. The only jewelry she wore was her wedding ring, and she wore it on her middle finger. "I never planned to speak publicly," she began, her voice calm and measured. "But silence is how people like my husband stay powerful. Silence is how the damage continues, unchecked." A collective hush fell over the crowd. She continued, her gaze unwavering. "I was married to Mason Valente for 8 years. During that time, I endured a campaign of psychological erosion, not with fists, but with silence, with financial control, with constant gaslighting." She paused, letting that sink in. Mason Valente presents himself as a visionary. Behind closed doors, he treated me like an obstacle. When I became pregnant, he told me I was an anchor tied to his potential, that I was a liability, that if I spoke up, no one would believe me. The flashes erupted. Once more, Sophia opened the folder and pulled out several printed pages. Bank records, timestamps, private investigator reports. These are just a fraction of the documents we are submitting in court. They show a pattern: deception, coercion, attempts to flee with our child, and calculated steps to erase me from his life and his legacy. The reporters leaned in. The cameras rolled. Mouths were slightly agape. "My decision to act was not about revenge," she said. "It was about protecting my son and reclaiming the voice he had allowed himself to take." When she walked away from the podium, the internet had already exploded. Within 15 minutes, the hashtag #SophiaSpeaks was trending worldwide. News outlets began to dissect every word. Clips were reposted. Subtitles were added. Translations were uploaded. At his company's headquarters, a closed-door emergency meeting had been called. Several board members were already on calls with public relations firms and lawyers. By the evening, an official statement appeared on the company's website. Effective immediately, Mr. Mason Valente has been suspended from all executive duties pending an internal investigation. No signature, no apology, just distance. Savannah, somewhere else in the city, watched the news from a hotel room window. Her name hadn't been mentioned in Sophia's speech, not once. It was both a relief and a sentence. She turned off the television and looked at her reflection for a long time. Then she pulled on a hoodie, packed the little she had brought, and slipped out a side door into the night. No one followed her. No one noticed. Back at the courthouse, Sophia stood quietly behind the building, the chaos fading behind the glass doors. Guillermo approached with a satisfied nod. "You could sue him for everything," he said. "I don't want everything," Sophia replied. "I just want enough to build something honest." He didn't ask what she meant. They turned toward the waiting car on the curb. Sophia's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The press conference was over, but her life had just begun to unfold. The sunset bled behind the city skyline, casting long amber streaks onto Sophia's penthouse balcony. The soft hum of traffic barely broke the stillness of the air. She sat wrapped in a loose ivory cardigan, her legs crossed under her. A cup of warm tea was in one hand, the other rested gently on her belly. The chaos was behind her, at least the part with cameras, statements, and boardroom scandals. Today, there were no reporters at her door, no legal documents sliding over mahogany tables, no more masks to wear, just stillness. Her phone vibrated beside her on the table. She let it buzz once, then twice, before finally looking at the screen. Messages from strangers, names she didn't recognize. "Thank you for speaking out. You gave me courage. You made me feel seen. I left because of you." She read them slowly, soaking in each one like a bombshell she didn't know she needed. None of these people knew her at all, and yet they understood something no one had seen during the marriage. The slow, invisible unraveling of a woman whose silence had been mistaken for compliance. Sophia set the phone down and turned her face into the wind. A single tear rolled down her cheek, not from sadness, but from release. She thought of Savannah, with no final words, no apology, just a shadow slipping into anonymity. Maybe that was mercy. Maybe not. She thought of Mason, suspended, disgraced, fighting to secure a version of his legacy that no longer existed. His lawyers said he would probably settle, that he wanted it all to go away. So be it. Sophia had no interest in revenge. It wasn't about that. She had done what she needed to, for herself and for the life she was still carrying. A small flutter beneath her hand. And then, stronger. Her hand pressed instinctively to her stomach. The baby kicked once, firmly. She let out a breathless laugh, amazed by the sudden action. "I felt you," she whispered. "You're here." She looked out at the soft gradient of the sky over the city, the violet bleeding into gold. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was losing something. She felt like something new had begun. Inside, the apartment was silent. The nursery was still half finished. The mobile over the crib still waited to be wound. But the house was hers now, and so was the silence. Not a silence enforced by control, but a chosen one. A silence of her own. She rose slowly from the chair, bracing herself as she stood. Her back ached a little, and her ankles were swelling again, but she didn't complain. She walked inside, turned on a soft lamp, and opened the journal on the desk. Her journal, filled with pages of truths she had once only whispered to herself. She picked up the pen. "He tried to erase me, but this child is proof that I was never invisible." She signed it, dated it, and closed the journal. Outside, the stars were beginning to flicker. And inside, Sophia Valente, no longer a wife, no longer a pawn, was finally at peace. Remember, your story matters. Your healing journey inspires others. Sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a simple act of courage, choosing to stay when everything in you wants to flee. Your engagement with the channel is so important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below, letting us know what you think. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more gripping stories.